No, America is not going to fall. I was just listening to a video by the prophet Eubert Angel, and then the different prophets who are claiming that America is in decline. Can't you look at the debt and all that kind of stuff? No, no. There are other prophets who are saying otherwise. And one of them that I'm inclined to agree with is Prophet Kim Clement, the late Prophet Kim Clement. He saw something different. And I believe he was on point. It's all right. He wasn't talking politics and he wasn't talking biases and sentiments as I've seen with Prophet Eubert Angel delivering his take on the American empire and also the rise of the Russian empire. And consistent with what I have also seen in the realms of the spirit and by visions, not just predictions and talking about them. America is not going to decline. It is not going to decline. And then he went on to make a statement that America is not mentioned in scripture, that it is just about any other nations and its decline is inconsequential. That is not necessarily true. That is not necessarily true. So if you go and begin to read the prophecies according to Daniel, the prophet Daniel, he sees the waters, the winds blowing upon the seas, and the four winds of the heavens striving upon the waters. So the four winds represent the spirit or spirits, okay, and all events. In another figure of representation are the four horsemen of the apocalypse that we see in the book of Revelation. I think was it the sixth chapter around there, after the fifth chapter, when the apostle John says that, and then I saw, and then I saw, and it went on. So there are four forces that usually happen. First is ambition. Someone with ambition to take over the world and to dominion and to obtain dominion and control over the world rises. Then he challenges the incumbent. What happens is war. That is the second horseman. The first horseman is ambition. The second horseman is war. After that horseman, what follows after actually is death and famine and starvation. Okay, accounting for the remaining other horsemen. Sorry about that. Now, so I was talking about the four beasts. So Daniel introduces us to the four beasts and he speaks of them. And because these are representations of empires or states, so every state on the planet, whether it is every government, is actually a beast. Because it is like an animal of its own and it has a certain way of doing things. That's why they do, and that's why the Bible represents them as beasts. And in one of those animals, those beasts, it says that it was lifted off the surface of the earth and was made to stand upon its 2 feet. And the heart of a man was given to it, a heart of a man, meaning that it was going to do humane things, and not just for anyone, but for the people of God. And I want to think that that beast represented the Persian Empire, because the Persian Empire is responsible for the return of the Jews from exile, from Babylonian exile, back to their land. Okay, back to their land, heralding the end of the 70-year-old exile in the land of Babylon when King Nebuchadnezzar took them, you know, captive. So he speaks of four beasts. But when he's speaking of the four beasts, by then the three beasts had already stood up and had already taken place. So the tally comes to seven. And the first beast would have been the Egyptian empire. That was the very first. And then after the Egyptian empire would have been the Assyrian empire. After the Assyrian empire, then would have come the Babylonian empire, which was the third. So in his time of the Babylonian empire, okay, he sees four other beasts rising. And amongst those four other beasts, we have the Persian empire, okay, the Medians and the Persians. After the Persians, then came the Greeks. After the Greeks, then came the Romans. Fast forward, the book of Revelation, the Apostle John speaks of five are fallen, one is, and one is yet to arise. Five are fallen. In other words, five beasts, five empires are fallen. One is, and one is yet to arise. arise. When you read the book of Revelation, when he's talking about, when the angel was explaining to him what the seven heads on the beast meant, or what their representation was. So the seven heads of the beast are a representation of seven major empires that were going to be in the contact and in touch, and were going to influence the culture of the entire world, and were going to influence the trajectory and the destiny of the people of God, and that is the nation of Israel. Okay, so it says five are fallen, one is. In other words, number six was still standing at the time. Now, number six was the Roman Empire. Okay, and then he says, one shall arise, which is the seventh. So the Roman Empire mutated, of course, it mutated. It got weakened. Roman Empire proper collapsed. And then what happened? Something came out, something with a fusion of state instruments and religiosity arose, and that was the Roman Catholic Church through the Vatican, the papacy or the popes. So they continued the reign of the empire until its hold was broken, thanks to especially the rise of Martin Luther. So those events precipitated its loss of influence. Because it was the major player in Europe, it was fractured here and there. It was the the sixth. Now, after the fall of the Roman Empire proper, we see the rise of Great Britain and its Protestant roots and leanings. Okay? Because the king of the UK is the defender of the Protestant faith, the defender of the church. That is there. That's how the kingdom is. That's how the rituals are read. Of course, but these days it is something completely different and disbaffling in that he is siding with the very enemies that would love to see Christianity gone from them. So the rise of the British Empire and then its decline. And after its decline, the rise of America. Because America is basically an offshoot of the British Empire. And these guys control the world. So America, Canada, Australia, and then there is New Zealand. Those nations. So they form what we call the Anglo-American Empire, which is the seventh. It is the seventh empire. So when when the prophet Eubert Angel says that America is not written in scripture, he just doesn't know. It wasn't mentioned by name, but it is referenced or referred to as the seventh empire, and it is the very last. It is the very last. So everyone always trying to convince you that America is going to decline. No. Because the prophet Daniel specifically says that he looked and saw that the fourth beast was very diverse. There is not an empire on this planet that has been like America. It has been the greatest of all, technologically, culturally, influence-wise, even in the wealth. There is not an empire. The Babylonians do not come close. The Persians do not come close. The Greeks do not come close. The Romans do not come close. The Assyrians do not come close. Even the Egyptians do not come close. So it is a very unique beast, a unique empire, very diverse and very different. But what is fascinating, it is spoken of and is said that it shall continue, but for a small season, for a small time, for a small time. The only way the American empire declines is after rapture. So everyone who is touting and is saying, "Oh, America is in decline," that is not true. The rise of China is necessary because prophecy must be fulfilled. China is the kings of the East. Their rise technologically and the arrogancy and the importance and what have you has nothing to do with the decline and the fall of America. Their rise has everything to do with the battle of Armageddon. Because when Jesus will have come and appeared, and that is after the 3.5 years of the 7 year period of tribulation, Jesus comes. When the Jews finally recognize him, he comes. That's when the Chinas are important, not at any other time, not now. So it is not true.